Hello Bob and welcome to this week's episode of The Week Ahead. Let's dive straight into the questions. The third week of the month is upcoming. We're used to this being quite a quiet period in macroeconomics. Is that going to be the case in this upcoming week?
Relatively quiet week ahead for the US dollar. Key stats: New York Empire State Manufacturing figures on Monday. That will draw plenty of interest with little else for the markets to focus on. The focus will then shift to Thursday. Philly Fed manufacturing numbers will also influence, though the key stat on the day will be initial jobless claims figures. That's going to need to hold below the 500k level to support the market optimism in terms of the economic recovery and particularly the labour market recovery. For the euro, it's a busy week ahead. Key stats include second estimate GDP numbers in the early part of the week. Then we've got finalised April inflation figures for the Eurozone midweek. And then at the end of the week, we got prelim private sector PMI numbers for May. These are for France, Germany and the Eurozone. There's plenty of interest there. Obviously the markets are expecting that rapid economic recovery. Service sector activity will need to continue to improve to support that sentiment. For the pound, it's also a busy week. We've got, in the early part of the week, we've got employment figures and inflation figures. Expect claimant counts to be the key driver. Markets are expecting obviously inflation to pick up near term. At the end of the week, private sector PMI numbers, prelim numbers, service sector PMI will be the key driver to the pound at the end of the week.
Meanwhile, what about the commodity currency countries? Anything going on in Canada, New Zealand or Australia?
For the commodity currencies, relatively busy week. For the loonie, we've got retail sales and inflation figures, with the markets expecting obviously the inflationary pressure to pick up near term. Retail sales will be key following the hawkish Bank of Canada. For the Aussie dollar, we've got consumer sentiment and wage growth figures. Both sets of numbers are particularly key. And then later in the week, we've got employment figures that will also be material for the Aussie dollar. Obviously, the RBA is expecting consumer spending to be a key component of the economic recovery. So all of these are contributors to that recovery. For the Kiwi dollar, quiet week ahead. Just all we've got is inflation figures. Obviously, markets were expecting a pickup in inflation. So weak numbers would peg back the Kiwi in the week.
What about Japan and China? Is there anything scheduled to happen in these countries in regards to macroeconomic data?
It's also a busy week for the Japanese yen. Early in the week, we've got first quarter GDP numbers and industrial production figures in focus. Obviously expect the GDP numbers to garner the greater interest early in the week. Focus will then shift to trade data later in the week. Obviously the market's going to be looking for improved trade terms to support the Japanese economic recovery. At the end of the week, inflation figures should have a muted impact on the Japanese yen, however. For the Chinese yuan, busy week. All the stats are due out on Monday. Key stats of fixed asset investments, industrial production, retail sales and employment figures. Expect retail sales and industrial production figures to be the key areas of focus. The markets are looking for momentum in the Chinese economic recovery. Any signs of a slowdown, and that will test demand for riskier assets at the start of the week.
Moving on, is there anything to note regarding geopolitics?
On the geopolitical risk front, status quo. Obviously just need to continue monitoring US-China relations, and there's obviously Iran in the Middle East as well. Need to keep an eye on that and the nuclear agreement, though there's not too much chatter at present. So, things could escalate at any time, so that does need an eye on it throughout the week.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show, Bob. Come back next week and see the next episode of the upcoming week, and check out all of our social media platforms. See you next time, and goodbye.